The Hot Shots, is Washington ready for Trump 2.0? This is Ticker. I'm Aaron Young. Great to be with you today, joined by Ticker contributor Ashley Gardner. Always good to see you.
Morning.
All right, let's get straight into it today. Washington, D.C. finds itself at the centre of history as Donald Trump is sworn in, marking a triumphant return to the presidency. After a turbulent political journey, his comeback is now more than just a personal victory. It's also a signal to millions of Americans who feel overlooked by the establishment. His arrival in Washington was met with grandeur, featuring a spectacular fireworks display at Trump National Golf Club, his own golf club, proving once again that Trump knows just how to make an entrance. The celebrations for the inauguration now begin. The political left is now asking what happens next. The Trumps bracing their return to the White House with private receptions and festivities, but the challenges ahead are enormous, from domestic policies to international diplomacy, and his bold plan with Elon Musk to completely change the way the government operates. And don't forget, this 4 years won't be like the last 4 years in Washington, because he doesn't have to worry about re-election this time around. This is his one last shot at changing America. Some say one last shot for the world to change as well when it comes to politics. Ash, what's your thoughts?
Well, who ever thought that we would be here after all that has happened over the past 4 years? We are now reaching a stage where we have the end of Biden, and I think that's something that we can be quite relieved about, because it's been quite clear that Joe's not really been quite with it for some time. And all of the, I guess, the legal actions, the prosecutions that were taken against Trump as well, it's somewhat incredible that quagmire of legal actions are now ancient history.
Yes, it's interesting watching this footage of Trump going up the stairs there on Air Force Two, which is the presidential plane lended by the current president, so that Melania and Trump and Barron there, speaking of a dynasty, can make their way to Washington. You and I remember watching as Trump left Washington for the final time on Air Force One to the Frank Sinatra's My Way, perfectly timed. He loves a show, he loves television, turns around for his wave there, of course. A pretty big event there in Washington as well. Just on the Joe Biden point that you mentioned, want to play this of him speaking about the Israel hostages.
I've worked in foreign policy for decades, and this is one of the toughest negotiations I've been part of. Many of you who follow these negotiations will attest that the road to this deal has been not easy at all, and a long road. But we've reached this point today because of the pressure Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. Some said my policy of a firm support for Israel is relentlessly pursuing diplomacy, risk drawing America into a wider war in the region. I listened to those voices, many of whom I respected a great deal, but I concluded abandoning the course I was on would not have led us to the ceasefire we're seeing today. But instead, it would have risked a wider war in the region that so many feared.
All right, so Joe Biden speaking there, and obviously sounds a bit like he's trailing off. Sounds like if you were to say, read 10,000 words, the last maybe 500 words, you'd start to sound a bit like you were over it. It's hard to imagine, had he have carried on for another 4 years.
I don't think it could have lasted.
But he believes he could have. He still
of course,
says that.
Of course. I guess that is that's probably the first sign of not really being with it, is the delusion of it. And I'm just relieved that this period is now at an end, because what would have happened if suddenly the president had to be woken up at 3 in the middle of the night, being told that you might need to consider pressing the red button here. I just don't think that he would have been capable of making such a decision. So, say what you like about Donald Trump. I know that people love him, people hate him, but I think despite his age, he is still with it.
Yes, it is interesting how the world works. Sometimes history does get things right. Biden, the 4 years, really gave Trump a chance to look back at the first 4 years, which frankly was chaotic. You think about the Time magazine cover when Biden took over, which was everything in the Oval Office was absolute chaos. Trump says that is because when he'd never been to Washington really before he became the president. He didn't know anyone, and he took on board in his first presidency a whole bunch of Republicans who weren't MAGA Republicans, who then were leaking against him because they didn't like his form of management. The past 4 years for Trump now seems to have been an opportunity for him to stop, reflect, choose. Do you think he'll get it right this time? He's got Susie Wilkes, who, by all accounts, is running the show as Chief of Staff. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, he does seem to have a stronger team around him these days. There was, as you say, a lot of chaos during the fourth term. We remember the articles, we remember the books, Fire and Fury, and publications like that. You know, we can only, I guess, for the sake of the world, hope that that his staffing situation is going to be a lot more stable this time. But that said, when the Don is in the thick of it, is he going to be able to, I guess, maintain the line himself? That is a big unknown. It's probably something that hasn't really been thought about too much as yet, but we'll certainly hear about it, pretty soon.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on him, right? This is the last 4 years, a chance to redo his legacy. But as we know with Richard Nixon, it doesn't always work out the second term, despite having an historic election. I mean, Nixon won pretty resoundingly in that second term for him. And then obviously a few years in, he's out the door having to resign. So you never know how a presidency is going to go at the beginning. It's certainly at the end that you can judge it as well. It's an interesting time for America because it is so divided. When the inauguration happens, there is going to be 50% of the population, or maybe a little bit more, who are delighted, elated, and relieved. And then there's 50% or so of the population who will be incredibly depressed. We saw protests over the weekend, the People's March. There they are, thousands of people taking to freezing conditions in Washington, D.C. A nation divided like never before. Does Trump have what it takes, and I mean his policies, to try and end the division?
Well, this time around, Trump has been a lot more successful in building a coalition that is, I guess, beyond his sort of immediate rusted-on followers. Let's see how long he can hold that together for. I mean, it's not just the fact that this is Trump's final term. What Trump will be very keen to do is to build a legacy, I guess, whether that is J.D. Vance for potentially another couple of... Or Barron, who knows?
Watching Barron getting onto that plane, I said verbally out loud to my partner, this looks like the beginning of the Trump dynasty here. I mean, he looks just like him. Apparently, Barron Trump was the one who came up with all of the bro chat podcasts, the going on Joe Rogan, the understanding that this is how you get to people these days, not by going on Fox News like it was in the 2016 election campaign.
Oh, certainly it seems that he has, he has some good intuition about how to communicate politically, which is not bad for a person so young. But hey, you know, Barron is still very young, so there's plenty more water to go under the bridge here.
Now, in the UK, new legislation could see pubs banning customers from discussing topics like transgender rights if landlords feel staff are being harassed under Labor's proposed Workers' Rights Charter. The charter aims to prevent third-party harassment but raises concerns about enforceability in philosophical conversations. Industry experts warn this could limit freedom of expression and turn pubs into battlegrounds for employment lawyers. Additionally, it might also impose significant costs on many of these businesses, with some estimates reaching up to £5 billion annually. Calls for reconsideration of the measures are growing as many fear that they will harm the economy and also job security. Ash, again, this feels like one of those things. It's hard to believe it's happening, but how did we get to this point?
Well, I think we see with the Starmer government at the moment a desire. I think there's a real kind of controlling authoritarian streak that goes through that government. Now, sure, many critics would say that, oh, look, the dangers of these laws are being exaggerated. But, the idea of policing pub banter is just seems bizarre. But, this is yet another episode in a long line of bizarre things that have been put forward by this government in the UK.
When I was typing for YouTube last night, doing some research about British pubs, the thing that kept coming up is the decline of the English pub, the traditional, beautiful, old building, hundreds, if not thousands of years old in some cases, where people get together at the end of a hard day or at the end of a hard week to catch up and to talk rubbish, which can quite often be great for the brain. Maybe not as many beers, but that can be quite fun too. We have a look at this picture that's been put out of Keir Starmer there. It isn't always like this. Sometimes people like to actually have a bit of fun at the pub and have these conversations. And if they get rowdy, there is an expectation that you're out the door. For the government to intervene in these sorts of things feels a bit get out of our way.
But, well, that's right. But also, this is the government placing the expectation on the employer to do the policing. And so governments are very good at coming up with all of these great ideas about how others can police the behaviour of a third party. It's impractical. Look, I know that there is a lot of laws, I guess, they're actually not designed to be enforced. They're designed to signal an intention, and that's probably more realistically what is happening in this case. But even so...
But what about free speech? Is there not something about free speech when it comes to having an open conversation? And it is so subjective what is offensive, particularly if you're talking about transgender rights. Someone could be saying, I don't believe that transgendered athletes should be playing in women's sports or using a women's bathroom. Having a debate about these conversations, surely there's no better place to do it. And the fact that people are open to debate, does this not send an unintentional signal? We don't want people debating topics, we'll just tell you what to do.
Well, I think we've seen for the past few years that, you know, this particular issue of transgender rights is a very, it's a very contentious issue. There are very very firmly held opinions on either side, and so who is to determine that which side is permissible or not? And this is the problem with I guess any sort of law or regulation that tries to police speech. It's just impossible.
We both have transgender friends, and I think about one of mine who I asked her recently, how do you feel when the topic of transgender is in the news? And she said to me, I just hate it. Just let me live my life, and can politicians stop trying to make me an issue? And it goes to many activists as well in the community who it frustrates people. They don't, and quite often you can find transgender people who have all sorts of political views, of course. They're not all left-wing activists. The conservative ones who maybe are in their 60s or 70s, who are very progressive on a lot of issues, find themselves in that place of stop putting me on the front page.
Yeah, look, I guess I'm not going to sit here and attempt to speak for transgender people. I'm obviously not qualified to do that. But
is the Prime Minister? That's the issue. Bureaucrats.
This is one of the problems with this issue and many other issues, is that an appeal to the mainstream is being killed off by the antics of a small, noisy minority. Now, I guess the idea of the noisy minority is not a new one, but you know, whether it's in Australia, in the UK, or in the US, I guess public acceptance of I guess minorities are being challenged because of a radical, illogical, even crazy, you know, the minority of minority that doesn't actually represent the group, and I think sometimes they just, you know, we saw it during the election in the US. Quite a memorable slogan. Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. Now, very simplistic, obviously, but it actually cut through. And so I guess the people running these campaigns, people active in these campaigns, maybe just need to sit back and think, well, what are we trying to achieve here? Are we actually trying to achieve change through greater acceptance, or do we just want to talk amongst ourselves and make us all feel better?
Yeah, well, as they always say, the loudest voice takes me back to 2002 or 3, the beginning of the Iraq War. There was a Pride March here in Melbourne that I went to, and at the very end of the march, there's a stage, and a lady very strong-willed lady gets on stage and says, on behalf of all gays and lesbians, we are opposed to the Iraq War. And I remember thinking at the time, how on earth can you say something like that? But there are people in the community who fight to get to very big voices and big positions that they feel like they speak on behalf of an entire group of people.
They feel like they speak on behalf, and they honestly believe that. They're out of touch. But they honestly believe that they are representing an entire group of people.
And
if
you celebrate diversity, and we should, you have to therefore, within these communities, understand that there's going to be a diversity of perspective as well.
Yeah, well, as we know, that the celebration of diversity does not extend to diversity of opinion. That's the get out clause in terms of celebrations of diversity.
Los Angeles is grappling with its most devastating fires yet, igniting outrage aimed at the Deputy Chief Christine Larson over her controversial remarks. In a viral video we'll play in a moment, Larson suggested the victims of fires might be at fault for their situations, adding to the backlash against the city's initiatives when it comes to diversity. The Palisades fire has ravaged 26,000 acres and is estimated to have caused damage up to $150 billion. Critics claim the LAFD's focus on diversity goals has hindered its firefighting capabilities, with Larson's salary drawing particular scrutiny. Amidst the chaos, many residents just want effective responses to save their homes. We saw it here in Victoria during the bushfires, where Christine Nixon, who had been brought in as police commissioner by the Bracks government, was brought in to fix a cultural problem within the Victoria Police Force, which was too many police shootings, too much of a masculine culture. But when push came to shove and there was a massive Black Saturday bushfire, she went missing, and the whole story became, I just needed to eat. What does this tell us about choosing someone during safe times to fix a cultural problem that then, when it hits the fan, are they then the right person for the role?
Yeah, it appears we've seen a lot of examples of this now, and the recent LA experiences has highlighted this. There are many, many efforts to improve cultures of organisations, and they're worthy, but are they the right person to be leading an organisation during an actual crisis? And I think what is becoming quite apparent is no. The example of the diversity chief from the LA Fire Department is a very unfortunate example, because I'm sure that she did not intend that video to just sort of only become prominent.
Let's not talk about it before we watch it. Let's have a look.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or, you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Yeah, obviously those comments, if you could turn back time, as Cher would sing, some pretty strong views there, and this being one of them from Twitter that I thought was interesting as well. And the idea of racism and sexism led to diversity quotas, and that the LA mayor pushed the LAFD to promote women. There is nothing wrong with the promotion of women, diverse men, people of in same-sex relationships, all sorts. I guess the issue then becomes, though, what happens to everybody else? And when you end up with 3 people in a position of power, and then things happen, there's obviously going to be questions.
Yeah, look, it does seem remarkable.
You want to see somebody...
The LA Fire Department ended up, but you know, that's where we are. There is no reason why, as you say, no reason why people of any background, as long as they're, you know, well qualified, can lead an organisation in a crisis. But I think the evidence is compelling that far too much effort has been focused on diversity at the expense of actually being ready. And look, it extends beyond the fire department organisation itself. We've seen in LA problems with water availability and so on. And look, you know, I'll just say quite clearly, diversity didn't cause the fires. No. Diversity didn't it's not the fundamental reason why there's been a failure here. Why has, the reason for the failure is multifaceted. However, there is a real question about the competence of people in leadership of these organisations, and that's the fire department and that's the office of the mayor.
It feels like there's always unintended consequences, and obviously when there is a toxic cultural problem within an organisation, there is a public will determination and then a political determination. Usually starts with the media picking up on a story, then it moves into the politicians, the public then gets on board with it as well, and there is a will to change things. For example, during peacetime, you would imagine that the military is very much talking about how can we fix the culture of rapes within the military and all of these toxic things that happen. But on the war field, when people are being blown apart, it's the last thing that people are thinking about. What you want is a leader who can prevent your people from being blown apart during those times. Is it that this doesn't feel like it's something necessarily new, and to deal with both of those issues, as in service delivery and having a great culture, really important. Do you think it can be done if you get the right person in the lead role, or do you think that it's something that maybe requires dual people within an organisation, someone focusing on fixing the culture and someone focusing on making sure the job can be done?
Look, it's really no doubt very difficult to run an organisation that is basically in a command and control environment where this is the whether this is the military or the fire brigade or the police. Then this is not a these are not places where everyone can sit around and talk about their feelings. These are sort of pretty regulated, rigid organisations where there's someone at the top and the orders are handed down. And it does really raise a question about, is there something inherent about that kind of organisation that leads to cultural problems? But that said, I actually want my police and my fire brigade and my military being actually properly run by someone. That does present a lot of challenges about culture, and it probably suggests to me that the approaches, the current approaches to fixing culture are actually not that effective.
Yeah, and we have to take into mental health into consideration here as well. You talk about high risk at mental health roles like paramedic, like being in the military, as we see with a lot of veterans who come out. Veteran suicides in Australia have been absolutely terrible. We also have a look at the fact that governments are very slow to fix these issues, and they seem to not want to deal with the consequences of the role, but without doing that, they're going to push out the very people who are great at their jobs. But it is, of course, a real struggle. Yeah,
I think what has happened here is that a bit of box ticking for diversity has been an easy solution. Look, here we've done this. We're trying to fix the culture when it's not actually addressing the real issue.
Yeah.
That's probably closer to the mark here.
All right, well, let's move on if we can, because we're going to talk about Australia Day. Support for Australia Day on its traditional date, January 26, has surged significantly, especially among young people. A recent poll revealing 69% of Australians now favour this date. 69%. That's up 6 percentage points from last year. Notably, support among 18 to 24-year-olds has risen from 42 to 52%. That's up 10%. 86% of respondents expressed pride in their nationality and believe in a commendable history. Experts suggest this reflects a broader shift in public sentiment away from divisive narratives. Ash, I find that part interesting, away from divisive narratives. In the lead up to January 26, every year Australia has the same debate. Nothing changes. It just seems to get angrier.
Yeah, look, I really have detected a bit of a change this year. There has been a reaction against I guess the usual narrative. Now, yeah, you're right. This debate is an annual thing in the couple of weeks leading up to Australia Day. I think there really has been a response against those corporations, those organisations who are even refusing to name the day itself and everything that comes with that. You'll see all around the place references to the January 26th public holiday or...
Well, I have friends who are in workplaces that are very progressive workplaces who are asked, if you want to work on January 26 and take a day off on a different day, then it's up to you and we will respect that and we won't punish you for it. 3 people out of 1,000 in that organisation decided to work that day. It feels like something that people over a conversation feel like they have to say there's something wrong with doing it on January 26. I think we can both understand all sides of the argument. For a lot of people in the Aboriginal community, is a really difficult day. What it has moved away from, though, which I think is what I'm a bit worried about, is it no longer feels like a debate about the date. It feels like a debate about Australia even being a nation.
Yeah, look, I think there are many who engage in this debate who would not be happy with any day at all, and essentially just want to, well, as was said a couple of years ago, at the front of Parliament House in Melbourne, to burn the place down. There is a certain element of, I guess, essentially the radical left who look, they know that they can't actually, literally destroy the Australian nation, but they'll have a good time, trying to achieve that aim.
We think about New Zealand that have a far better governmental relationship with Maoris than what you would say that Australia does with its Indigenous population, or what we're told. We have had the Closing the Gap, obviously, which continually fails to meet its targets. But there was a vote in 2016 in New Zealand to change the flag, the Kiwi flag, which is the Union Jack up the top left and then 4 red and white stars on the right. Very similar to the Australian flag as well. Yet nearly 60% voted to keep the current flag, and there was no conversation about race, being a racist country as a result. Could you imagine what would happen if the Prime Minister decided after the Voice referendum that we'll do a referendum on the date of January 26?
Well, for him it would be sheer madness, but the outcome, I think, would be pretty close to what the Voice vote delivered. But it would also, more importantly, really pick at that scab again in terms of...
He moved on very quickly, didn't he, Albanese, from that?
Yeah, he did, but actually did a lot of damage that we really didn't need to do in terms of this issue more broadly.
I thought it was really sad. I thought that on the night of the vote, I received a text message from someone in the Indigenous community who I interviewed many years prior, who was begging. He'd obviously sent the same message to everybody in his phone book, begging because the feeling of loss was so strong. And given that the polls for quite a long time had said this isn't going to get over the line, it felt really sad that the government carried on with something that would make people have this emotional rejection feeling, I would imagine. And while there's no sense of rejection, certainly how I feel, it's sad that this led to that.
Well, there's sheer bloody-mindedness on the part of the government to pursue it in this way. I think if we remember 3 years ago, it was the end of a period of Liberal National Party government. Labor was in power, and Albanese thought he was going to change the country, but and probably was just a little bit too full of self-belief, and that proved to be a disaster.
Let's talk about India Day just quickly. Delhi Police issuing traffic advisory ahead of the Republic Day parade. We're not having a parade in Melbourne for Australia Day. I've covered many of them. I remember going and doing Vox Pops, these pictures from previous parades, of course. I remember doing Vox Pops in this crowd, and everyone I Vox Popped wasn't actually from Australia. Hilariously, they were all from New Zealand or somewhere else. But we love a parade, and we're not having parades anymore to celebrate Australia. There's a lot of talk about it's the date, but as I say, we're not doing it on any other day, and therefore we're not really celebrating the country anymore. We seem to be having conversations about division rather than about what brings us together, which the concept of Australia Day once was. Do you think the difference here, and when we talk about the Republic Day in India, is it the fact that they are a republic? Is it the fact that Australia's Federation Day, and maybe that's what we should be celebrating instead, just came about because we were sick of the Brits.
Yeah, look, essentially, India's Republic Day is a celebration of the end of colonial rule in that country. So, but interestingly, last year I went to an event on Australia Day at the Shrine of Remembrance. There's a bit of a 21-gun salute that happens at midday on that day. And I would say that the vast majority of people attending that event were members of the Indian community celebrating Australia Day, and I think that that speaks volumes.
Yes, you wonder what people think when they watch these. All right, let's move on. Because Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's polished image as a perfect California couple is under threat due to serious allegations against the Duchess of Sussex regarding staff bullying. The claims, highlighted by a Vanity Fair profile, could damage their reputation in the United States just as they prepare for significant projects, including Meghan's new Netflix series, With Love, Meghan. Former employees coming forward accusations of mistreatment that mirror earlier claims from her time at Kensington Palace. These troubling allegations suggest a culture of distress among her staff, with some reportedly requiring therapy. Royal experts warn that this could be a disaster for Meghan, undermining her efforts to present herself as a caring mother and wife. Ash, when we have a look at the Vanity Fair story here as well, and we combine that with images and video of both Meghan and Harry at the fire front over the previous weeks, what do you make of it all?
Well, this piece in Vanity Fair, this was no just sort of cheap hit job. This was a very well-researched, well-written, 8,000 word extensive piece, and I think it brings together a lot of themes that have been spoken about over the past few years since so-called Megxit. Particularly with regards to allegations about her behaviour of bullying staff and others around her. You can see that, I guess the With Love Meghan title of the Netflix series does suggest that, this nice, warm, caring individual that really does not seem to reflect the truth. I think people were prepared to give her a go early on, but people actually, I remember certainly when they visited this country, they were embraced. But things have gone really sour, and I think...
All right, let me play devil's advocate here. I remember standing out the front of Government House as Meghan and Harry were arriving there and trying to score an interview with the both of them. Apparently that was the trip, I might add, where Meghan had such a terrible time that they basically decided that they wanted to separate themselves from the royal family shortly after, which they then did, and the rest goes there. All right. In our culture, we don't necessarily like outsiders who stick two fingers up at us. Is Meghan essentially being bullied by the press? And we've seen a number of, I think this week we've got a court case between Harry and the Murdochs over this as well, and there have been many others with the Daily Mail over the past few years too. Are we essentially getting frustrated that they fob their nose at an institution that we hold dearly, and the blame has been pointed squarely at Meghan to say, you're a homewrecker?
Oh, look, she probably refused to play the game that is expected of the royals in terms of playing with the UK media, and
so
it
did
all
Diana.
sort of flowed from there. Well, she played the game quite successfully, but also, it didn't work both ways. Or rather, it can work both ways.
Yeah.
And you can't actually have your own narrative all the time that you would prefer. And I think certainly Meghan and Harry have reacted against that. But and look, that's fair enough. If you don't like what's being said about you in the media, but they're not Robinson Crusoe there. Yeah, there's, she had a case, both Harry and Meghan had a case that they were being bullied by the media, but equally, I think there are very compelling stories out there that suggest that, she's not without sin herself.
Yeah, that is, probably true. I mean, there's been, we play these pictures of them at the fires in Los Angeles over the past few weeks, and there's been a lot of criticism. Why are they there, pushing themselves back into the spotlight? Are they there on behalf of the British royal family? Why are they doing this? Why are they putting themselves out there when they want privacy? And then it seems like, I guess from a media perspective, it does feel like there is this push to control the narrative. Do documentaries on Netflix looking like you're fantastic. Do documentaries do an interview with Oprah, making allegations against the royal family. It does feel like there is a push on one side to try and own the narrative, but that isn't, as you say, how the media works.
Yeah, look, Team Meghan and Harry were one-trick ponies in the sense that there was really only interest when they were bagging out the royal family. If they were to do another interview pouring another bucket on the royal family, it would probably be a great success.
I bet if they did another interview saying that everything's great, where I just had a chat with my brother, things are going well, people wouldn't care. And that's where I wonder whether the media pushes this.
Yeah, well, look, no one really cares too much about the Polo documentary. Who knows whether this With Love Meghan series is ever going to make its way? It probably will, but I don't really see it being a success. We've seen what happened with the Spotify contract, and they ended up being branded as grifters by one of the Spotify executives. So you've really got to wonder what on earth they're doing.
Asher Gardner, appreciate your time.
Good to be here.